Welcome to The Explainer. It is the morning of July 2nd, 2026, and today we're diving into some incredibly deep and frankly mind-bending territory. We're unpacking the core philosophies presented by a creator named Yasminn on her channel just to see what happens. Specifically, we're going to debate a pretty radical premise. Is our modern, deeply held concept of individualism actually a complete biological and physical lie? I'm joined by my co-host to help break this whole thing down. Hey everyone, I am so excited for this one. It's one of those rare conversations that really bridges the gap between hard science and deep philosophy. So let's just dive right in with a question that honestly might make you a little uncomfortable. Are you an individual or are you an illusion? We in the Western world have this deeply ingrained baseline belief that we're entirely separate, autonomous beings navigating the world completely on our own. But Yasminn's analysis completely turns that assumption on its head, and she actually uses biology and physics to do it. Right, which brings us to Section 1, the myth of autonomy. Now, I gotta play defense here for a second. Modern individualism is basically the absolute bedrock of our society. For centuries, we've been taught that civilization functions best when we build ourselves up as strong, standalone pillars. It's the whole mentality of being self-reliant, highly competitive, and really focusing on strict personal boundaries. It absolutely is. But Yasminn contrasts this exhausting, isolated rat race with the indigenous worldview. She references the brilliant indigenous leader and philosopher Ailton Krenek, and in his framework, humans aren't separate entities just living on top of the earth. We are literal, physical extensions of the land. We're inseparable from the environment, which means our survival inherently relies on collaboration, not isolation. Okay, moving right along to Section 2, the biology of interbeing. So I'll admit, the indigenous worldview sounds beautiful, but as a skeptic, it could easily be dismissed by some as just, new age poetry. If we're going to tear down the concept of the independent human, I need hard scientific proof that we aren't just independent biological machines.
Oh, you want hard science? Okay. Welcome to your new reality as a walking, breathing ecosystem. When you look at the actual numbers, human body composition is roughly 53% microbial cells and only 47% human cells. Literally more than half of you isn't even human. We're basically just highly complex public transit for our microscopic overlords. So even at a cellular level, that independent machine argument totally falls apart. Your gut microbes actively influence your mood and your decisions. Your mitochondria, which act as the literal engines for your cells and your survival, were once entirely separate bacteria. You aren't singular. You are a biological collaboration of life forms.
And this brings us to a crucial concept introduced by the renowned Buddhist monk Manja Cohen, which Yasminn highlights. The term is interbeing. It basically gives us a shared vocabulary for this whole phenomenon. It's the understanding that nothing exists in isolation. To exist means to deeply connect and interexist with everything else. Your gut microbes, your environment, the oxygen you breathe, they are constantly collaborating to keep you alive. You literally cannot be isolated. Which brings us to Section 3, the stardust connection. Okay, I will concede that I am a walking petri dish. Fair enough. But I would still argue that my personal identity, my specific timeline, began at my birth and will end at my death. And that keeps me fundamentally separate from the cosmos at large. My identity is bound by my specific block of time.
See, that's a very human way to look at it. But Marcelo Gleiser's physics perspective completely challenges that timeline. When you map it out chronologically, the physical matter and genetic information that constructs your body has been active without a single second of interruption since the universe began. About 14 billion years ago, elements were forged in the intense heat of dying stars. Then 3.8 billion years ago, we see the first single bacteria ancestor emerge on Earth. And in the present day, those exact ancient continuous elements are physically manifesting as you. You didn't just pop into existence out of nowhere.
To get incredibly specific about it, think about the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, or the carbon in your DNA. These exact cosmic ingredients were forged in the burning cores of ancient stars. When those stars exploded, they scattered the dust that eventually formed you. You aren't a new beginning. You're an ancient thread of existence that is simply taking a human shape for a short period of time. Wow. All right, Section 4, the ego as cancer. So, I am really starting to grasp this physical and biological interconnectedness. The science is undeniably there. But if this is scientifically and physically true, why is human society so incredibly obsessed with selfishness, power, and individual gain? Why do we actively fight against this interconnectedness every single day?
This is where Yasminn uses her most striking metaphor. If the universe is a living organism, modern individualism is essentially a biological malfunction. Think about how cellular cancer happens. It occurs when a cell forgets it belongs to a larger body. It rejects signals from the organism, prioritizes its own multiplication, and just consumes everything around it without contributing anything back. Now contrast that with the human ego. It acts the exact same way. It forgets it belongs to humanity. It prioritizes personal gain and power, and it consumes without reciprocity.
Ego is when a human forgets they belong to humanity, prioritizing their own personal gain over collective well-being. Man, that is a devastating comparison. It really makes you pause and reflect, because what Western society often praises and structurally rewards as ambition or hustle or self-interest perfectly mimics the behavior of a tumor, slowly killing the larger organism it lives inside.
Which brings us to Section 5, the wave and the ocean.
I have to admit, I'm experiencing a bit of morning existential dread right now. It forces this hard, Socratic question. If we are all truly just one single cosmic organism, do my memories, my personality, my individual life, do they even matter at all?
Right, that is the ultimate fear. If we're all one, does my identity completely disappear? It's completely valid to feel that way, and Yasminn addresses this head-on. Our sense of autonomy, even if it is temporary, feels incredibly real and is absolutely necessary for this specific human experience. The goal isn't to erase who you are.
She shares this really beautiful metaphor to explain it. You are not in the ocean. You are the ocean taking shape. Individuality isn't erased by non-duality, it's just given a new context. Think of a wave rising out of the ocean. You can watch it shape, the direction it's traveling, how the light hits it. For that moment, it appears separate. It gets to be a unique wave for a few seconds before returning to the whole. But it was always made of the ocean. So the crucial point here is that individuality is just a beautiful, temporary sense of autonomy. We can enjoy having skin in the game, we can enjoy our unique character, our quirks, our ego, without being tragically attached to the illusion that we're entirely isolated and alone. It's about maintaining context while still playing the game of life.
Exactly, and that leads us to the climax of this debate in Section 6, non-duality as a social strategy.
Because this isn't just about sitting on a mountain feeling peaceful in meditation or pondering abstract physics. Yasminn is taking this scientific and spiritual concept of oneness and weaponizing it as an urgent, highly practical strategy for modern social survival. We're talking about entirely restructuring how we view our daily interactions.
Right, it's a remarkably practical blueprint. We need to recognize strangers as cells in the exact same organism, shift from fear and isolation into awe and collaboration, and really understand that our personal actions ripple across this infinite web. It shifts non-duality from some esoteric, floaty concept into a real-world framework for systemic health and deep empathy.
Right. To care for the other is to care for yourself. To hurt them is to hurt yourself. If we accept the science that the universe is a living, connected organism, then compassion is no longer just a nice moral choice. It is the absolute biological baseline required to keep the entire system from completely collapsing. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. If modern individualism is the disease, is interbeing the only cure for our society? We urge you to really examine how treating yourself as an isolated island might actually be harming the whole ocean. Thank you so much for joining us, and keep questioning what you think you know.
You know, usually when we look in a mirror, there's this underlying expectation of precision, right?
Yeah, exactly. It feels very engineered, I guess.
Right. You look at your reflection, you see the boundary of your skin, you see the edge of your shoulders, and you just point and say, you know, there it is. That's me. That's a distinct, isolated individual.
It feels fundamentally binary. Like you look in the mirror and your brain automatically categorizes reality. There is you, and then there is absolutely everything else that, well, isn't you.
Me and not me. It's clean. And frankly, it's comforting. I mean, we genuinely like things to be visible and perfectly categorized.
Right. It gives us a sense of control over our reality.
Exactly. But today, on the morning of the 2nd of July, 2026, we are looking at material that essentially, well, it shatters that mirror completely.
Yeah, it really is.
We're pulling from an incredibly thought-provoking collection of video transcripts by a creator named Yasminn from her YouTube channel, which is called Just to See What Happens.
Which is a great name, honestly.
It is, and our singular focus for this deep dive is to look at a concept that sounds almost contradictory at first. We're looking at non-duality as a pragmatic social strategy.
Which is a phrase that, honestly, might instantly trigger a bit of skepticism.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, non-duality or oneness is so often framed as this esoteric retreat to a mountaintop spiritual concept.
Like very woo-woo.
Exactly. It gets filed away under abstract philosophy. But what Yasminn is doing, and what we're going to rigorously unpack today, is taking hard physics, cellular biology, and ancient Stoicism and combining them to see if this idea of oneness isn't just poetry, but like the actual biological baseline of human survival.
Yeah, we're going to explore how the literal physical evidence for interbeing directly challenges our modern Western obsession with hyper-individualism. And we're going to chew on this highly provocative concept brought up in Yasminn's work, the idea of the ego as a cancer.
And not just as a metaphor.
Right, not a metaphor, as a literal biological malfunction.
Yeah.
So, let's start by looking at the actual boundaries of that reflection in the mirror, because if we're going to deconstruct the individual, we have to start with the physical body.
Right, the biology.
Yeah. And the biology here instantly dismantles the illusion of a single autonomous self. The human body isn't a single entity. It's an ecosystem.
A massive one.
You, me, the person listening right now, we contain more microbial cells than human cells.
The math alone completely destroys our perception of self,
Yeah.
right? Like you think of you as the human cells that make up your tissue, your organs, your brain cortex.
Yeah.
But you are a walking, breathing symbiosis.
Yeah.
Take mitochondria, for example. We learn in basic biology that, mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells.
The classic textbook line.
Exactly. They're the engines keeping you alive. But what often gets glossed over is the evolutionary mechanism of how they actually got there. Mitochondria have their own distinct DNA. It's completely separate from your human DNA.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. Billions of years ago, they were independent, free-living bacteria.
See, that is the part that always stops me in my tracks. They didn't just evolve alongside us, they were a completely separate life form.
Yep. At some point in the primordial soup, a larger cell engulfed one of these smaller bacteria, but instead of digesting it,
They merged.
they merged. The smaller bacteria provided energy, the larger cell provided protection. And that ancient, desperate merger for survival is literally the only reason complex life, including humans, exists today.
Wow.
Your very heartbeat right now is powered by an ancient bacterial negotiation. And, it doesn't stop there. Your gut microbes, again, completely non-human DNA, actively manufacture the neurotransmitters that influence your mood.
Right, like serotonin.
Exactly. Your decision-making, your immune responses. You are quite literally a massive collaboration of multiple forms of intelligence.
So, from a strictly biological standpoint, identifying as a singular I is just statistically incorrect. We're a we.
Statistically, structurally, yeah.
But Yasminn's work takes this even further into physics. She references a panel she attended featuring the award-winning physicist Marcelo Gleiser. And his perspective is that at a quantum level, subatomic particles simply cannot exist in isolation.
Which is huge. Gleiser's work forces this massive paradigm shift in how we orient ourselves in space. Like, we tend to view ourselves as completely separate objects dropped into the world. Like a coin dropping into a slot machine.
Right.
But quantum mechanics and astrophysics paint a picture of deep, uninterrupted continuity. Consider stellar nucleosynthesis.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the iron in your blood that is actively carrying oxygen to your brain right now, the calcium hardening your bones, the carbon forming the double helix of your DNA, these elements are not native to Earth.
They couldn't be, right? Because the early universe was basically just hydrogen and helium.
Precisely. To get heavier elements like carbon or iron, you need unimaginable heat and pressure. Those elements were forged inside the burning cores of ancient, massive stars.
That's wild.
A star spends billions of years crushing lighter elements together. And when it finally fuses enough material to create iron, the star dies. It collapses in on itself and explodes in a supernova and violently scatters those newly forged elements across the vacuum of space.
Right, and that cosmic dust eventually coalesced into our solar system, into our planet, and like the apple you ate for breakfast.
Exactly. You can trace the physical lineage of your own hand back to the explosive death of a star billions of years ago.
It sounds like a bumper sticker, you know? We are made of stardust. But it's rigorous, literal astrophysics.
It's hard science.
And then there's the biological lineage, which is equally staggering to me. If you trace the family tree of all living things on Earth, the tree outside your window, a blue whale, and it leads back to a single common ancestor about 3.8 billion years ago.
Think about the mechanism of that survival. 3.8 billion years of uninterrupted, continuous life, Through ice ages, asteroid impacts, massive tectonic shifts, the spark of life never once extinguished.
What once?
It just kept adapting, mutating, and changing shapes.
Yeah.
You are just the current temporary shape of a 3.8 billion-year-old unbroken chain.
There is a specific embryological fact connected to this that really grounds it for me.
Oh, about the maternal lineage.
Yes. Think about the physical moment the building blocks of you were formed. Because of how human reproduction works, a female fetus develops all the eggs she will ever carry while she is still in utero.
Right.
That means half of your genetic material, the specific egg that would become you, was physically sitting inside your mother's ovaries while she was developing inside her mother's womb.
It's a profound realization, really. You were already there, a physical presence, deeply embedded in your maternal lineage decades before you took your first breath.
Incredible.
When you combine the astrophysics, the microbiology, and the embryology, you realize the boundaries of the human body are purely functional.
Yes.
We need skin to keep our organs inside, obviously. We need a barrier to navigate gravity and the physical world. But that boundary is like a cell membrane. It looks like a hard border, but it's completely permeable. You are in a constant, non-stop exchange of particles, thermal energy, and information with your environment. Your breath instantly mixes with the atmospheric gases exhaled by the trees outside.
Your body heat dissipates into the room. You're not a closed loop.
You're really not.
Okay, wait, I'm struggling with this a bit.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I hear the astrophysics, I understand the endosymbiosis of my cells, I intellectually grasp that I am a permeable walking coral reef made of ancient stardust and bacteria.
Right.
But practically speaking, when I wake up, check my phone, and sit in traffic, I feel entirely alone. I feel completely singular.
Sure.
To use an analogy, it feels like being a single leaf on a giant oak tree. But somehow my brain is completely convinced I'm self-sustaining. I have entirely forgotten the branch, the trunk, the roots, the soil, and the rain. If this interconnected web is our hard physical reality, why is the psychological illusion of the isolated individual so incredibly convincing?
That is the pivotal question of Yasminn's inquiry. If we are physically and biologically a continuous web, how did the leaf forget the tree? What are the actual mechanisms of our psychological separation?
Right, because something is causing it.
Exactly. And to answer that, the transcripts bring in perspectives from that same panel Gleiser was on. It included Moja Cohen, a Buddhist monk, and Elton Krenak, an indigenous leader and philosopher.
Oh, I love Krenek's work.
It's brilliant. Krenak offers a very direct answer. He says human beings are literal, physical extensions of nature. We are the land walking around. But we have systematically engineered a way to forget that.
And Moja Cohen introduces the concept of interbeing, which is a framework originally articulated by Thich Nhat Hanh, I believe.
Yes.
The core mechanism of interbeing is that nothing can just be by itself. A flower cannot simply be. It has to interbe with the soil, the rain, the sun, and the pollinating insects. If you remove any of those external elements, the flower ceases to exist. We only exist because of everything that was, is, and will be. But to get back to the root of my question, why do we feel so separate? Yasminn points to a very specific structural human invention: language.
Let's break down the mechanics of language, because this is where the cognitive separation truly begins. Yasminn uses the story of Genesis to illustrate this perfectly. When Adam is tasked with naming the animals, that is the first true act of separation.
Oh, interesting.
From a seamless, continuous flow of unified sensory experience, fragmentation begins.
How does that actually work in the brain, though? Like, how does a word separate us from reality?
Think about the neurological process of identifying an object. When you look out at a forest before you have the vocabulary to label it, you're just taking in a massive unified field of color, light, and movement. It is a pure, unfragmented experience.
Just raw sensory input.
Exactly. But the moment you look at a specific shape and assign the word tree to it, you've drawn an invisible linguistic box around it. You have structurally severed it from the soil, from the sky behind it, from the air moving through its leaves. Language relies on nouns and verbs, which inherently divides reality into a subject and an object. There is you, the observer, and the tree, the thing being observed.
Ah, so the word itself creates a distance. By tagging an experience or an object with a label, we stop experiencing the raw reality of the thing and start interacting with the tiny, isolated conceptual box we just built for it.
Exactly. Language is a filtering mechanism. We instantly tag a name to an emotion, a person, or an experience, and suddenly we no longer see the vast interconnected reality of it. We just see the label.
That makes a lot of sense.
And what Yasminn's analysis shows is how this linguistic separation scaled up into a massive cultural separation. Western society didn't just invent these linguistic boxes. We built our entire global infrastructure on them. We took this functional cognitive illusion of separation and turned it into the defining religion of the modern age, the cult of hyper-individualism.
And we can see exactly how that infrastructure rewards this illusion. I mean, we are taught from birth to view ourselves as completely isolated islands. The ultimate goal in modern society is to be self-reliant, self-made, self-focused.
Which, based on the biology we just discussed, is a total fiction.
Right. You literally cannot exist for 3 minutes without the external infrastructure of the atmosphere providing oxygen to your lungs.
Yet, we have built economic and social systems that completely ignore our biological reality of interbeing. And Yasminn really drills down into how this plays out in the modern attention economy of 2026.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It really is. This hyper-individualism fuels what she calls the spectacle, the extreme polarization, the algorithmic outrage, the intense isolation of the modern internet. These aren't glitches in the system. They are features of a system that monetizes division. Polarization is a highly strategic dismantling of the social fabric.
Let's apply this to the 2026 tech landscape. Think about doom scrolling, right? The algorithms are designed to pit rigid identities against other rigid identities. It utilizes the exact mechanism of language we just talked about, labeling and boxing.
Yes.
You see a post from someone you disagree with, and the system encourages you to slap a label on them. They're no longer a complex, breathing human being made of stardust with a complex maternal lineage, you know? They're just a representative of an ideology you hate.
And that dynamic perfectly mirrors Martin Buber's philosophical concept of the I-it relationship. In an I-it mode, we treat other people as objects. They are data points. They're useful for our own advancement, they're predictable, or, in the case of modern polarization, they are threats to our individual identity.
We're managing them based on our own fear.
Exactly. We completely fail to encounter their full interconnected reality, which Buber calls the I-thou relationship. In an I-thou encounter, you strip away the linguistic boxes and the ideological labels, and you recognize the shared biological and cosmic existence of the other person.
Okay, I have to pause here, because if we are saying that language, labeling, and this sense of individualism create this false, destructive separation,
Yeah.
aren't they also the exact tools that allowed humanity to survive and evolve? I mean, Yasminn acknowledges that we use this exact cognitive ability to invent physics, chemistry, and modern medicine.
For sure.
We need the rigid structure of language to build an airplane or to communicate complex surgical procedures. If I go back to my analogy of the leaf in the tree, well, isn't the leaf's realization of its own boundaries what allows it to efficiently photosynthesize?
That's a great point.
I guess what I'm asking is, aren't we risking throwing the baby out with the bathwater by attacking individualism so hard?
That is a vital tension to hold on to. Yasminn doesn't dismiss the utility of our cognitive tools. In fact, she calls what we've managed to build with our limited, fragmented senses adorable and fascinating.
Adorable. I like that.
Right. Language and the temporary sense of individual autonomy we feel are highly functional. They are necessary for surviving at the specific scale of our human bodies. You need a functioning sense of self to buy groceries, to navigate a four-way stop, to organize a community.
Right. If you are entirely dissolved into the cosmic oneness, you probably aren't going to remember to pay your electric bill.
Exactly. Let's use an analogy to clarify this tension. Think of individualism and the ego like a specialized spacesuit.
Okay, a spacesuit.
If you're going to explore the hostile, complex environment of human society, you absolutely need that suit. It provides a boundary, it allows you to interact with the environment, to pick things up, to communicate. The suit is brilliantly engineered.
I see where this is going.
The problem Yasminn is highlighting isn't that the spacesuit exists. The catastrophic issue is that we have been wearing the spacesuit for so long that we have completely forgotten we have a biological body underneath it.
Oh.
We think we are the suit. And because we've forgotten the vulnerable, interconnected body inside, we start acting in ways that damage the very life support system we depend on.
That makes so much sense. The illusion of separation is a highly effective tool, but treating it as the absolute and only reality is what causes the systemic damage.
Exactly.
And that exact tension between the necessary functional spacesuit and the destructive hyper-isolated identity brings us to the most intense and controversial concept in Yasminn's transcripts, the idea of the ego as a disease. She uses a metaphor that pulls no punches. She says cancer is a cellular ego.
To truly grasp the weight of that metaphor, we have to look at the actual biological mechanisms of cancer. Like, how does a healthy cell become carcinogenic?
Right.
In a healthy body, a cell knows its role. It communicates constantly with its neighbors through chemical signals. It knows when to consume nutrients, when to divide, and crucially, it knows when to undergo apoptosis-programmed cell death for the good of the larger organism.
It acts in accordance with Interbeing.
Yes, perfectly stated.
But a cancer cell completely breaks that covenant.
Yes. A cancer cell is essentially a cell that has forgotten it belongs to a larger body. It stops listening to the chemical feedback of its environment. It refuses to undergo apoptosis. It begins to hoard resources, consuming everything around it for its own endless, unchecked multiplication.
Just blind growth.
Exactly. It prioritizes its own immediate, localized survival completely at the expense of the whole, seemingly unaware that by killing the host body, it is guaranteeing its own destruction. That is the biological definition of ego.
Which makes the psychological comparison incredibly stark. Yasminn argues that the human ego, when unchecked, is a psychological cancer on the species.
Yep.
It happens when a human forgets that they belong to humanity, to the earth, to the interconnected web of life. They prioritize personal accumulation, endless consumption, and absolute power over the collective well-being.
Sound familiar?
Oh, absolutely. They stop listening to the feedback of the environment, whether that's ecological collapse or societal breakdown. They operate entirely from within the rigid confines of the spacesuit, hoarding resources like a rogue cell.
It is a profound framing, because it shifts our understanding of societal greed. Hyper-individualism isn't just an ethical failing or a moral blind spot, you know. Under this framework, it is a literal biological malfunction of the human species. If humanity is a macroorganism, hyper-individualism is a carcinogenic mutation.
And this ties seamlessly into the Stoic philosophy that Yasminn layers into her argument, specifically the Stoic concept of sympathia.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, the ancient Stoics believed that the universe isn't just a collection of dead rocks and empty space. They viewed it as a living, divine, intelligent body. Everything inside it, humans, animals, rivers, stars, shares the same animating spark, the same logos.
Because of that deep structural connection, the Stoics deduced that a change in one part inevitably affects the whole. If the universe is a single living body, then virtue acting with wisdom, justice, and harmony simply means acting in alignment with the overall health of that organism.
Right. It means operating as a healthy cell.
Exactly. Vice, on the other hand, selfishness, greed, excess, is acting exactly like that cancer cell. It is moving in opposition to the flow of the universe's health.
But how do we square this with the necessity of the spacesuit? Because in another part of the transcripts, Yasminn talks about the game of life. She says that the ego, the character we play in our daily lives, is the skin of the game.
Right.
You can't participate in reality without an avatar. So we have this massive contradiction. On one hand, ego is the necessary skin of the game, but on the other, it's a societal cancer. At what precise moment does healthy, necessary self-interest mutate into a carcinogenic state?
Yasminn resolves this tension beautifully by utilizing the classic metaphor of the wave and the ocean. Let's expand on that to see how the mutation happens. Imagine you are standing on a beach watching the ocean. A wave swells and rises above the surface.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
For that brief duration, you can clearly identify its specific shape, its velocity, the way the sunlight catches the crest. For a few moments, the wave appears to possess complete individuality. It is a distinct event.
But beneath the surface, it is never, ever disconnected from the ocean. It is just the ocean temporarily expressing itself as a wave.
Exactly. The water molecules making up that wave were part of the deep ocean a moment ago, and will return to the deep ocean a moment later. A healthy ego, the functional spacesuit, the necessary skin of the game, is the wave recognizing that it is the ocean. It rises, it plays its part, it crashes onto the shore with force and purpose, but it doesn't attempt to hoard water. It doesn't fear crashing because it knows its fundamental nature isn't the temporary shape, but the vast water itself.
That is such a clear distinction. So a cancerous ego is a wave that somehow suffers a cognitive glitch. It convinces itself that its temporary shape is its absolute reality.
Yes.
It believes it can exist completely separate from the ocean, and it spends all its energy trying to freeze itself in place, consuming the energy of the waves around it to sustain its own illusion of permanence.
Precisely. The ego only becomes a cancer the moment it loses the context of its own existence. The moment it drops the awareness of interbeing and fully believes the linguistic box it put itself in.
Okay, this is all fascinating theory, but I want to aggressively drag this down into the mud of daily life.
Let's do it.
What does this actually mean for us right now moving through the world? If hyper-individualism acts as a societal cancer, what is the practical biological remedy? Because adopting non-duality can't just mean sitting cross-legged on a mountain, visualizing waves and oceans while the world burns, right?
No, definitely not. And that brings us to the core thesis of Yasminn's work. Cooperation as cosmic biology and non-duality as an actionable, rigorous social strategy. Yes. The transcripts present a strictly biological argument for love and empathy. In most spiritual traditions, love is treated as a high-minded metaphor, a poetic ideal we should strive for to be good people.
Right, like a moral imperative.
But you look at the biology we discussed earlier, the cellular symbiosis. The continuous chain of life cooperation is literal survival. Isolation and unchecked extraction lead to death.
So love isn't just a feeling, it's the biological baseline of communication for a healthy, interconnected system. Just like the cells in your liver communicate chemically with your pancreas to keep your physical body alive, humans must communicate through empathy and cooperation to keep the macroorganism of the species alive.
To ground this even deeper into the physics of reality, Yasminn brings in the theories of Professor Bernard Carr.
Remind me about him.
Carr posits that the universe might actually operate as a hierarchical nested conscious structure. Small pockets of consciousness exist inside larger ones.
Like Russian nesting dolls.
Exactly like that. The independent consciousness of your cells operates within the larger consciousness of your human body. Human consciousness operates within the larger biosphere of the Earth, and the Earth operates within the overarching consciousness of the cosmos.
Wow. If that nested structure is true, if the universe is a massive living organism, then love and empathy aren't just quaint human emotions. They are the actual operating system of reality. They are the sympathetic nervous system of the cosmos.
Which forces us to completely reevaluate Weber's concept of the I-Tao relationship. Adopting non-duality isn't about passive peace. It is a highly active, rigorous social strategy.
Right.
By recognizing interbeing, you realize that taking care of the ecosystem or actively listening to an ideological opponent is literally taking care of yourself. It is the realization that there is no out there. There is only the macroorganism.
I want to focus on how this strategy specifically neutralizes the spectacle of the 2026 attention economy. Because right now, our digital and political environments are built entirely on triggering our cancer cell egos.
They thrive on it.
We are bombarded with scripts that tell us to be hyper-vigilant, to view our neighbors as threats, to hoard our resources. How does recognizing interbeing actually stop that loop?
It stops the loop by refusing the linguistic and emotional script. When you adopt non-duality as a pragmatic strategy, you stop reacting to the polarized I-it narratives. You refuse to play the game where the person across the table is reduced to a flat avatar of a political ideology.
Even when they are attacking you.
Even when they are attacking you, you look past the spacesuit. You recognize their hostility as the fear of a wave that is forgotten it is the ocean. You see the shared biological and cosmic reality of the person in front of you.
Right.
And by refusing to engage in mutual destruction, you remove the very fuel that the polarization engine relies on to run.
I hear that, but let's be brutally honest about the reality of 2026.
Yeah.
We live in a ruthlessly competitive economy. Attention is a commodity. People are genuinely fighting for resources, for jobs, for basic survival. If I walk into a cutthroat corporate environment or step onto a polarized digital platform and I act like an interconnected, empathetic thou while everyone else is acting like a hyper-competitive, cancerous...
Right. You think you're going to lose.
Yeah. Isn't that just a recipe for getting absolutely crushed? Isn't non-duality a massive vulnerability in a predatory system?
That is the ultimate pragmatic fear.
Yeah.
It is the ego screaming that if you drop your weapons, you will be destroyed. But Yasminn's transcripts address this exact fear by redefining what true power and success actually look like.
How so?
The argument is that true sovereignty isn't about hoarding the most resources, dominating the conversation, or crushing the competition. That is just the anxious behavior of a dying cell. True sovereignty is the absolute ability to hold the center of your own attention.
Holding the center of your own attention, meaning you don't let the external noise dictate your internal reality.
Precisely. It is a refusal to let the algorithms, the fear-mongering, or the aggressive scripts of others dictate how you move through the world or how you perceive the human being standing next to you.
Yeah.
The strategy of non-duality requires immense grounded courage.
It really does.
It takes bravery to break the feedback loop of hostility, to look at someone who is operating entirely from a place of fear, separation, and ego, and still consciously choose to relate to them from a place of abundance and interbeing.
You are essentially choosing to be the anti-venom to the cultural cancer. By holding on to your awareness of the ocean, you stop participating in the endless, anxious multiplication of the ego.
And you start participating in the health of the organism. You don't need to fix the entire global system to change your immediate experience of it. By reclaiming your center of attention, by choosing to operate as a healthy, interconnected cell, you become the seed for a different kind of transformation.
That's powerful.
You shift the baseline reality for everyone you interact with. That is why non-duality is the ultimate biological social strategy. It is cooperation and survival achieved through the unflinching recognition of our literal, physical, and spiritual unity.
What an incredible arc we've covered today. We started by dismantling the mirror, looking at the hard microbiology of your endosymbiotic cells and the astrophysics of the stardust in your blood to prove that you are an ecosystem, not an individual.
A literal galaxy of life.
We explored how the invention of language and the resulting cult of individualism built a cognitive spacesuit that we eventually mistook for our own skin. We broke down the uncomfortable reality of how a hyper-isolated ego functions exactly like a biological cancer on the human macroorganism.
It's heavy but necessary.
And finally, we reframed oneness from a passive spiritual retreat into a rigorously active, courageous strategy for surviving and healing the polarized landscape of 2026.
It is a profound paradigm shift. But intellectual understanding isn't enough. The sources and the philosophies they draw from demand active observation. They demand that we test this out in the laboratory of our daily lives.
Yes. So my challenge to you, the listener, is to observe your own mind today. Notice the exact moments where you feel defensive. Notice when you feel isolated or when you catch yourself slipping into that transactional I-it mindset where you view the barista, the driver cutting you off, or the person on your screen as merely an obstacle, a label, or a tool.
It happens to all of us.
It does. But when that happens, I want you to remember the hard physics and biology we unpacked today. Remind yourself that your feeling of total separation is not just an illusion. It is physically, biologically impossible. You are breathing the same atmosphere, powered by the same ancient bacteria, and built from the very same shattered stars.
And if we take Professor Carr's theory to its ultimate conclusion, that the universe is a massive, living, conscious organism, and that human beings are simply its sensory nodes, we are literally the universe developing eyes and ears to look back at itself.
Which leaves us with a final, staggering thought to chew on the next time you feel entirely, hopelessly alone in this world. If you are literally the universe experiencing itself, then perhaps your deepest moments of loneliness aren't personal failures or social deficits at all. What if your profound feeling of isolation is just the universe experiencing a temporary, localized glitch in its own self-awareness? Just a single wave for a fraction of a second forgetting it is the ocean. Something to think about the next time you look in the mirror.